please remember to leave a like, a comment, share the video about, and if you haven't already, subscribe. Thank you. Well, isn't this just fantastic? Hello everyone, welcome back to another video. Today we're going to start with a topic that was sent to me over Twitter, because I'm really bad at getting to things. I don't look at notifications anywhere near as much as I should, sorry about that. Atomegon didn't know if you wanted to see this, a retweet of Gabe Kaminsky. New. A Beverly Hills charity funded by Hollywood celebrities like Adam McKay, no idea who that is, and Kendall from something called Succession, are behind extreme climate protests like the tomato soup Van Gogh vandalizing in 2022, according to tax forms and other documents reviewed by DC Examiner. Accompanying it is an article from the Washington Examiner, and I thought what we'll do is go through this first, and then move on to some other rather amusing things that have taken place concerning Just Stop Oil in the United Kingdom. Hollywood left-wing foundations behind climate charity quietly bankrolling extremist protest groups. Do Just Stop Oil count as, or Extinction Rebellion as extremist? That is a debate. A little-known climate change advocacy organization, heavily funded by celebrities and influential left-leaning foundations, has been quietly dishing out grants to various activist groups deploying unorthodox and extremist methods across the world to protest fossil fuels, documents reveal. Anti-fossil fuels groups have been ramping up protests in the US and overseas as part of a coordinated campaign to bring awareness to climate change by vandalizing fine art, blocking major roads, and even gluing themselves to sports cars. That's a bit of a dick move. Many of these activist hubs are being bankrolled by Climate Emergency Fund, a Beverly Hills-based charity linked to Hollywood celebrities and top liberal non-profit organizations, aiming to shape the Democratic Party's agenda according to tax forms that were reviewed by, as you saw in the tweet, the Examiner. When it comes to the most damaging to the planet polluter countries, America is quite high up there. My country is not. That's not to say we don't bear some responsibility. Of course, we should want to try and make things a bit better, if we can, that is. However, we have become dependent as an entire planet on fossil fuels, not just to run cars or heavy machinery in general, but also in the production of vital medicines. Humanity is not at the stage yet where it is capable of moving beyond it. The energy efficiency argument of things like wind, solar, tidal doesn't quite stack up either, especially when you consider how environmentally not remotely friendly it is to produce a solar panel. Nuclear does seem like a viable option, but, well, some nations have been selling off all their uranium, and others have been shutting it all down in favour of destroying villages to dig up brown coal, like France and Germany. Way to look like the eco-friendly folk, right? Tell me you're totally not dependent on Russian gas without telling me you're totally not dependent on Russian gas. Climate Emergency Fund has quickly become the ATM that radical environmental activists turn to fund their latest disruptions. That is a quote from Caitlin Sutherland, the executive director of the conservative watchdog Americans for Public Trust. And as their destruction increases, so should the scrutiny on who is bankrolling the Climate Emergency Fund and their ties to more mainstream environmental groups that might disagree with these over-the-top and dangerous tactics. For the sake of it, I wouldn't consider gluing oneself to a sports car a dangerous tactic unless that car is moving, in which case, you better hope that solvent is of the highest quality. If it's not epoxy, you're screwed. Although it is equally likely you'll just lose your hand, your foot, or maybe whatever it is you've glued to a car, maybe a ball sack. In the next paragraph, it speaks about an entity called Declare Emergency that believes that our reliance on fossil fuels is genocidal and criminal. They took credit for smearing paint on the display case of a sculpture at the National Gallery of Art in DC. Just Stop Oil, of course, everyone knows who they are. I've covered them many times here, have been referenced here for trying to damage art, but in reality just showing how middle class they are. They know the paintings are protected. They are just smearing paint on acrylic, or smearing soup on acrylic. A waste of perfectly good soup, I might add, with some lovely croutons. Oh, yes, splendid. In truth, up until the point of reading this article, I'd never heard of the Climate Emergency Fund, or who backs them for that matter. But it says in the article, these groups and those like it are either funded directly by the CEF or are part of coalitions backed by the CEF, which touts on its website how it has trained tens of thousands of activists since being founded in 2019. Both Declare Emergency and Just Stop Oil are part of a coalition with almost a dozen climate protests groups called the A22 Network. A22, isn't that a road in England? The problem a lot of these groups has is, while it seems quite noble that they're all willing to stand up for the environment, reality is they're not achieving much at all. They're really not. You might think they are, but actually they're not getting anything done. They're basically corporate America, seeming to be doing something but actually accomplishing very little in the process. Raising awareness is one thing, but the politics aren't on your side. And that's the thing. A lot of this doesn't come down to actually doing anything, it comes down to playing the game. The politics game that is. And politicians will say they're doing something because they're thinking of what they consider a long-term play, which is something many of these groups cannot comprehend, because to do that means to take time. They believe if one does not seek to resolve the issue with immediate effect, a snap of the finger, that you are taking too long and you are dawdling, dithering, delaying, which to them is haram. Just so you know who Climate Defiance are, because I think it's only right we actually talk about them briefly. They claim to stand for an end to fossil fuel extraction on federal lands and waters, elevate climate change to a top 3 political issue in American politics, and stand in solidarity with our sister struggles for racial and economic justice. So yes, plenty of buzzwords. Whereas on Twitter it mentions a few key names as being donors to the CEF, when you go to the article itself it only really references those who are more democratic voting. As is well established, America is the centre of the world, and this article certainly portrays it as such, while simultaneously referencing Last Generation in Germany and some girl who tied herself to the net at the French Open last year. So instead we're going to move to Just Stop Oil because something quite amusing happened, and I think it's worth talking about. Alice Chambers, aged 36, had travelled alone to the Mole in central London on Saturday for the coronation, because it turns out she is a royal superfan. She was eagerly awaiting a glimpse of King Charles III when she found herself being handcuffed by the Metropolitan Police, who had burst into the crowd. The architect, originally from Australia, had lived in London for 7 years. She had no idea what was going on when she happened to be sitting beside a group. As they had not started protesting, she thought nothing of it. But as it turns out, she was arrested on suspicion of potential to cause a breach of the peace at 9 AM, along with a dozen other people, in scenes that were then captured by Sky News cameras. Quote from Alice: "I was sitting on my little stool and I noticed there was some yelling, and then some police swooped in and were pushing the crowd back. I must have been right on the edge of that. I went to get up and 2 police officers grabbed me and handcuffed me. I don't think they said anything. I think they arrested me before they asked a question. I feel like once I was in the system, they didn't listen. I tried to explain that I wasn't a part of the group." Alice was held for 13 hours. During that, she was repeatedly questioned, subjected to physical searches, held in a cell, had her DNA, fingerprints, and mugshot photo taken before the police even realized, she might be an innocent bystander. Yeah. Just the thing with Alice. On her social media, she has posted a lot of pictures, proving she is very much a royal superfan attending royal events. Here is one of them. She looks very posh, I'm just saying. How this ties into Just Stop Oil is the fact that the protesters arrested were Just Stop Oil protesters. She was considered one of them. 2 senior police officers interviewed her at 7 PM more than 10 hours after she was arrested. Then the police acknowledged they'd made a mistake, with her being quoted as saying, "I think the only question they asked me was, why were you on the Mole? I explained the whole thing, how I went down there at 7 AM to get a good spot, how I went one way and it was blocked. I ended up walking back to where there seemed to be some good space. They looked at each other and said, 'Have you ever heard of Just Stop Oil?' And I said, 'Up until today, no.' They said, 'We have no further questions,' and they then apologized." She then asked them, "Was there anything I could have done that would have meant I didn't end up here?" What makes this really cruel for her is she wanted to see the coronation, a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to see the coronation of King Charles III. A royal superfan denied the opportunity to see something like that, a spectacle. Many of us watched it on TV because we could not have gone there. I would have loved to have gone to it personally, but it would have been nigh on impossible without having planned a few days in advance. And for someone like Alice Chambers, she was denied and deprived that opportunity. That's not fair to her. An apology might not cut it in this instance because you have guilt by association, a lowly oik that just wanted to see King Charles. Now, I know the Met Police have faced a barrage of criticism over the arrest of a number of people using new anti-protest laws to detain demonstrators. They even had to back down over the arrest of 6 anti-monarchy campaigners because there was no evidence they were going to disrupt the event, only that they are anti-monarchy campaigners. This is important. I support the right to peaceful protest. We just have to be a little careful, just a little careful. You've got to prove they were going to do it first. We don't act beforehand, we have to have everything that can prove conclusively that it was intended. And that's because, again, the royal family sit very far removed from everyone else. A Scotland Yard spokesperson has said, "We are aware that a woman was arrested in relation to a protest on May the 6th. The arresting officer was from Lincolnshire Police and the complaint was therefore passed to the relevant force to investigate." Because why take responsibility there and simply say sorry, right? So instead, the chief inspector from the Professional Standards Department at Lincolnshire Police said, "We have now received a complaint and are reviewing it. The Met will assist by providing any relevant information they require." What is it with people in high office who refuse to say sorry when they make a mistake? The buck stops with a lot of you, higher ups within your little ivory towers, yeah? All you had to do was say sorry to Alice Chambers. The police officers have said it. Obviously the officer who arrested should say it, but so should you. It's the very least she deserves. Now there's one last thing I want to talk about before we finish, concerning more drivers getting very angry with Just Stop Oil protesters. Just Stop Oil's traffic disruption continues, prompting a member of the public to confront them, but police tactics to stop them have now been refined. Enraged members of the public, frustrated at the slow walking in the crowd and the road, remonstrated with the activists, shouting at them, "People are trying to go on their daily business. How much pollution and traffic are you causing?" However, where I mentioned that the Metropolitan Police have refined their approach here, by 8:30 AM, they've managed to impose a Section 12 condition on the march, as they have done multiple times in previous days. 22 minutes later, protesters were back, but this time in Whitehall for another slow walk. It took police only 2 minutes to convince them to leave the road. This all would lead to be an indicator that these changes to the law have been effective to an extent, because as you can see, the protesters in this image are on the path. Those that did not move were arrested for breaching the conditions of the Section 12. A spokesperson had fumed about this by saying the Public Order Bill and specifically Section 12 notices are being used to remove the British public's right to peacefully oppose government policies that threaten the lives of hundreds of millions of people. I mean, you could argue billions, since that's how many people are in the world right now. Marching has been an integral means of bringing about social change for centuries, be it for those seeking universal suffrage, those seeking to gain equality, or those seeking to make transport accessible for disabled people. So we're not going to answer the question of how much pollution are you causing when cars are running very slowly behind you. Interesting. Personally, I don't agree with the idea of a Section 12 in the slightest. Of course I don't. It's a terrible idea to reduce one's ability to protest. And with policies like that in existence, it seems only a matter of time before more freedoms are removed. And that's something I'm not okay with, which is why Section 12 is, in and of itself, a bad idea. While simultaneously it can be argued to be good, again, once you open those floodgates, no.